house to the lake, and there was a dock there, so sometimes we could get a boat there if it was left at that dock, and we could ride in the boat, rowboat. We could row across the lake to the other side, and our school was on the other side of the lake. So many times we would go to school on the lake, and we also had taken bicycles with us from America. So Fern and I sometimes would ride our bicycles around the lake. And but anyhow, it was coming back from the school in a rowboat. I came and I rowed the boat up to this point, this dock near our house. And I was getting out of the rowboat. The rowboat, these rowboats I think were made in Europe. They were very nice. And this boat had a point, a metal point on the bow. It was a decorative thing on the bow of the boat. And I was getting out of the boat from the front. I'd walk up to the bow and get out there into the dock. I fell, and when I fell, I sat right down on that prong, that metal prong that was sticking up on the bow of the boat. And it went into my rectum, and I couldn't get off. I could not get off of the boat. And some Americans were walking by on the road around the lake when they saw me there, and they saw my problem. And they came over and they helped me, and they pulled me off of the boat. And then they got help for me to take me to the hospital.
Wow.
And this all happened just soon after we arrived in India. And by that time my father was in the hospital because of his operation for appendicitis.
Yeah.
And so I was put in the same room with my father. We were in the same room together, and of course it wasn't long until my wound healed, and then I was able to leave. But my father was in that hospital for 3 months.
Oh.
And my mother had a Jeep. We had our Jeep there, but my mother did not know how to drive. So she could not drive the Jeep. The only way she could get from the house we lived in to the hospital was by foot, by walking. So every day she would walk to the hospital, whether it was raining or whatever the conditions were. She would have to walk to the hospital to see my father. And these were, when I think about what my mother went through at that time, sometimes it almost brings tears to my eyes. My mother suffered so much, and her love for my father was so great. She just wanted to see him every day, but the only way to do that was to walk. It was a distance of more than a mile one way. So this was the beginning of our time in India. It was a very difficult beginning. My father was in the hospital. The bill was mounting. We did not have money for this. And Mother was trying to communicate. My father could not communicate with the office in St. Louis. My mother had to do all of that. And Then there was all of the worry about the future. My father's heels were burned, both of them, third-degree burns on each heel. And the German doctor, the lady doctor, was trying her best to get medicine to bring healing, but it was taking a long time and the pain was so severe. They finally told my father he could go home for a change. He'd been so long in the hospital, about 3 months altogether. But when he went home, I'll never forget, I came home from school one day and I went into my father's bedroom, and they had put a wire thing over his blankets, underneath his blankets, so the blankets would not touch his feet. His feet were so tender from the pain and the burns. And I went into the bedroom and I saw tears in my father's eyes. And I had never seen my father weep before. He was a strong man. And I never saw him weep before that. And when I saw my father weeping from the pain, it just affected me deeply. So eventually we had to take him back to the hospital. And altogether he was in the hospital, in that Kodaikanal hospital, for 3 months. The bill was getting higher and higher. And Mother was trying to get help from headquarters, trying to communicate with them. But it was such a struggle. They couldn't understand. And Mother was doing her best. It was not easy. We couldn't pick up the telephone in those days. We very seldom ever called the States. It was all letters. And some of our teachers in our school, especially one teacher, she was a medical doctor, but she was teaching in the school for a short time. Her name was Kaitan. She was a missionary doctor. She and her children gave Fern, it was more than 100 rupees they gave Fern to take home to our mother to help on our bills with the hospital. And they saved money by dismissing the woman that cleaned their toilets, and their girls cleaned the toilets themselves. They were commodes. They didn't have flush. And the girls did that to save money to help us.
Okay.
And we saw acts of kindness like this. There were some people who really helped us. But when I think now of the pain my mother felt, having to bear all of this burden, my father's condition, but somehow God strengthened her and helped her. And it was during that time that I came home. We were not yet in boarding. We were attending a boarding school, but we were staying with my folks who had rented this little cottage. I came home one night. As I recall, it was around 10 o'clock at night, probably after my study hall. We were expected to spend 2 hours in study hall every night. So when I came home, I walked up on the porch and I could hear my mother praying. And I drew close to where I could listen and hear what she was saying. and she was praying for me. I never forgot that. It affected me very deeply. And Mother was praying for me that night, and I'm sure many nights. But anyhow, we had a Jeep, but she could not drive.
No.
She didn't know how to drive. So the only way for her to get around was by foot.
Yeah.
And
So when he, of course, the next year he had he had plastic surgery.
yes,
By Paul Brand.
yes. And it was the next, and then my mother was trying to get someone who could take my father to Vellore, to the Vellore hospital. And finally, she found someone, and Dr. Betts was from Oregon, and he was well known for his surgery. He was not the one who did the work especially on my father, but it was the one that did the work on my father was a very famous doctor. And I'm trying to think of his name.
Paul Brand.
Paul Brand.
Yeah.
He was the one that did the plastic surgery on my father. They had to first do one leg. They would cut the leg here and put this leg in a cast, and then this leg would be attached like that. This leg would be attached to that leg in a cast.
Okay.
And it had to be like that for 2 weeks. And this flesh then would grow. And then they changed to the other way, so that both heels could have skin grafted from the other leg.
Yeah, transfer.
Yeah, and so my mother was invited by Dr. and Mrs. They're from Oregon. I just mentioned their name, but they became wonderful friends, and they let my mother stay in their home in Vellore.
Okay.
So she stayed with them while Paul Brand did the medical work.
Yeah.
And so when my father came away from there, he had skin grafting on both heels. And they were still tender. So my father wanted to make his trip to North India and up to the Northeast India. They had never seen him yet.
But
so
and he went there before the plastic surgery?
no, after that.
Okay.
He went to Northeast India after the plastic surgery.
Okay.
So when he was on the train, making his way towards Northeast India, he was in a first-class compartment with a doctor. And the doctor was watching my father, as my father had to put treatment on both of his heels. So my father got his medicine out and all, and was putting this treatment on his heels. And this doctor, this lawyer, he was a lawyer, said to my father, "Why are you doing this? What happened to you?" So my father told the lawyer that about his burns in the hospital. And when the lawyer found out it was a mission hospital, he said to my father, he said, "You could sue that hospital for everything they have. You have a right to sue them." And my father said, "No." He said, "That is a mission hospital. They're helping people. I could never do that." My father told the lawyer, "I would never do that." And so my father eventually made his way to Northeast India with his heel still very tender. You know, he had to cut the shoe out of the back of the shoe. He had to take out the hard, stiff part of it because it would rub a sore on his feet. And I don't know if you've ever heard this story before, Stan, but I just want you to know you had a wonderful grandfather who suffered much.
How much time between the 3 months he had in the hospital in Cody and between that and the time he went to Vellore, did he go to Vellore right after those 3 months?
No. He had to wait until he could get someone to help. We had to have somebody, because Vellore's a long distance from Cody Connell.
So did he go to Audur between that,
No,
or
he couldn't.
he stayed in Cody?
He stayed in Cody.
Okay.
He stayed in Cody until he could get someone to help with transportation
Okay.
to get him to Vellore. Vellore's, I think, about 500 miles from Cody.
Okay, and then, okay, and you said 2 weeks in one position and then the surgery in 2 weeks in the other position.
Yes, yes.
So by the time he got out of Vellore and before he went to Northeast India, by then you had been in India about how long?
I'm just guessing. Probably it would be altogether be getting close to a year.
Oh, wow.
Probably, because when he first got there, then soon he had surgery because doctors were going to be leaving Cody, going back to their hospitals.
Okay.
So they told him he should have surgery on his appendix right away. So soon I'm just guessing, Stan. We don't have any diaries from Mother, and I don't think in her book she mentions this, you know.
When the Vellore surgery was over, and you know, there's all the stuff that Grandpa did to go to Audur to buy the land, all of that. Was that done before he went to Northeast India?
Before he went to Northeast India, Brother and Sister Nielsen came up from Kerala. They lived in Kottayam, so not far from where we eventually settled. And Brother and Sister Nielsen offered to take us down to Kerala to show us where we would be living, so the people there could meet my father. They knew he had come to be their missionary, but they'd never seen him yet.
Yeah.
So Brother and Sister Nielsen were such wonderful friends, and they came up to Cody, and they took our family down to Kerala, and they showed us not only Audur, they took us to Audur. They showed my father where he would be living, and during all of this time, of course, he had the sores on his feet.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put this all together because there's something about this that's not clear in my own mind, you know, how he managed that trip, and I don't think that we have this in any of our diaries.
You had, because you had arrived in India in March, and then all these things happened, the appendectomy, the 3 months of that surgery, and then going to Vellore, and so all of this is during 1949.
Yes, it
Yeah,
would be.
and then the monsoon is coming in, you know, in the later
Yeah,
second half of the year,
yeah,
and then most of the mission families would go down to the plains again.
yes.
And when the surgery in Vellore was over, were you in Adur by Christmas time?
I think we were.
Yeah. So
I think we
so
were.
your first Christmas in India is in Adur.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And so then he saw the property there in Adur, the mission bungalow which we have now. Okay,
We didn't get that property. That came later.
that came later. Okay.
Yeah, the first house we rented, it was a rental property, and it was on the main road. And
Okay.
that's the house where we moved in first, and there were no flush toilets there, just commodes. So all of those high school children and middle school, they all walked along the main road, and when they saw the Americans in this house, they all wanted to come and see us. So many times I was sleeping on the porch, the veranda, there were bars, wooden bars there. So I would wake up in the morning and here were these school kids looking through the window, looking through the bars, not windows, they were just wooden bars, looking through the bars to see what these Americans were like. And it was a daily affair. Every day when school was on, they would come by, walk around our house, look in the windows, and we finally got a little furniture, enough so we each had a bed, you know, and when we put you in the front, one of the front bedrooms, was right next to the road. That was up high, higher level. But when you would cry, it could be easily heard by people passing. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm confusing that. That was in the next house we moved to, which was near the road. But when you were a baby, yeah, that's right. When you were a baby, we moved to that better house where Audrey and I could have a separate home.
But that's 1958, so that's much further in the story.
Yes.
But when did he move from his first house? When did your family move from the first house where you stayed? Then you got the property, which is the bungalow, mission bungalow there now.
Yeah, they got that property while we were in boarding school.
Okay.
So when we came down from boarding school, then for the first time we saw that better house.
Oh, so the first house, you were not in it very long.
Maybe a year or something like
Oh,
that,
okay.
I think.
I see. And then when you came down, that means summer vacation or the next winter vacation. That your long vacation was in the winter time, right?
Yes, yes. I
So,
think
so the next winter, that means we're talking about the getting near the end of 1950. Okay. When you came back down for the winter, that's when you were in the new place.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were, so when we came to that new property, we were just so thrilled because it was so much better than before.
Yeah.
We didn't realize then that there were so many snakes around there. But because of the wooden wall, the dirt walls, the rats had moved into these dirt walls and made holes. And snakes had moved into those holes. there were many, many poisonous snakes on our compound.
Yeah.
We didn't know that then.
Yeah.
But Dad had, when he found out the snake charmers were passing through from Tamildon, they were all Tamil-speaking people, the snake charmers. And he found out they were in the village, then he had one of the brothers go down and ask them to come to our place and get the snakes. So whenever they would pass through, Dad would have them come and catch snakes as much as they could.
Yeah.
So many snakes were cobras and other poisonous snakes
Yeah.
were caught by the snake charmers. And
Now, we are at some of the stories about Woodstock School. Okay, I have heard some of the stories before about there was one nurse that people didn't think she was a very good nurse, so they would stand outside and sing, "For she's a jolly good fellow, quack, 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 quack."
yeah, it was not the nurse; it was the doctor.
Oh, doctor. Okay.
A German lady.
Okay.
And she became the school doctor. Dr. Rosenthal was her name.
Okay.
She was a German. And she was the one treating my father for all these 3 months, trying one medicine on one foot and another medicine on the other heel. And we were very frustrated with her treatment, but anyhow, she did not have a good reputation among the students in the school. It wasn't just us, but others had the same opinion of her.
Yeah.
So a group of us boys, we decided on a Sunday evening to go down to her house and sing. So we snuck out and we went down to her house on a Sunday evening, and we sang. We stood out and tried to make it as melodious as we could. For she's a jolly good doctor, for she's a jolly good doctor, for she's a jolly good doctor, quack, 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 quack. We sang like that. And then we made our way back to the school. Well, the next morning, we were all called to the principal's office. He had already received a report from Dr. Rosenthal about what we had done. So he called us in his office and scolded us. He said she is trying her best to help people, and this is not the way to say thank you. And so all of us were punished. He gave each one of us different punishments. My punishment was, he said, "Harry, I want you to go out and get in a position right by the pathway that all the Indians are walking by as they go to the market in front of our dispensary. And I want you to stand on your head and let them all see you." So I tried, but I kept falling down. I had never practiced standing on my head, but I tried my best, and so that's all he expected. But anyhow, later, when some of the other fathers of classmates started coming up to the hills, they heard this story. And one of the fathers, a prominent father of the group, when he heard this, he got together with my father, and they just laughed and laughed about this. They thought it was so funny. And they really enjoyed this. But anyhow, yes, that's true. That's what happened.
And tell about the time that you almost drowned in the lake.
That lake was Berrigan Lake. And we had walked, a group of us.
Well,
boys,
that's not Coding Lake.
No.
Oh, okay.
A group of us had walked about 14 miles. And we walked a lot. We loved to walk in those hills. But we walked a lot, and we walked about 14 miles to Berrigan Lake. And Brother Root went with us. He was our mathematics teacher. Very nice people, Americans. He and his wife both taught. But he was our mathematics teacher, and he was our scout leader. I belonged to the scouts. So after we walked 14 miles to Berrigan Lake, there was an old canoe there. So they decided they wanted to ride in the canoe. It was a dugout canoe, a wooden canoe. So I told one of our classmates, his name was Bruce Cummings. I told Bruce, I said, Bruce, I hope they don't tip this canoe over, because if they do, I don't know how to swim. I told him this, but we got in the canoe, all of us, and got out into the lake, and they started horsing around, playing around, and rocking the canoe back and forth. It wasn't long until the canoe tipped over, and we all fell into the lake. And I went down under the water. I tried to come up, but I couldn't. And I was afraid it was probably the end of my life, and about that time somebody came down to me and got a hold of me and pulled me up. And Bruce told me later, he said, after we all fell in the water, we were playing around there, and then I remembered you told me you couldn't swim. So I started looking for you. And he saw some bubbles coming up.
Yeah.
And he dove down and found me there. And he got others to help him, and
Yeah.
they got me up to the surface and to the land. Saved my life.
Yeah.
But Bruce Cummings was a wonderful friend, and I appreciated that so much. But that was in Berrigan Lake that I came close to dying there.
You mentioned a bunch of the people that you went to school with, and I remember you mentioning Fred Clothy.
Yes.
And also mentioning the guy who was the math genius.
Oh, yes.
Who?
Fred Clothy, his parents were missionaries in Madras, and they were godly people. They were not of the same Pentecostal faith, but they were close to that, you know. They were very godly people, and we went to visit their mission station close to Madras. They were very lovely people. And Fred was a very nice boy. He was one of the few that would not attend dances. So he and I often would be alone in the dormitory while the others went dancing. But later, Fred came to the States, and I don't know what happened to him, but he did not maintain a faith in Christ like his mom and dad. And he began to study Hindu gods and goddesses. And he has written about 9 books on Hindu deities. And books that are appreciated by the Hindus.
Well.
And it's so sad, you know, that Fred Clothy, I saw him just one time as an adult. We went to a reunion, and he was friendly, but totally different than he used to be. he was no longer the dedicated Christian he
Yeah.
was as a boy. And he's well known as a philosopher, I guess a philosopher and a scholar, but he's become well known because of the books he's written on Hindu gods and goddesses.
And the guy who memorized pi out to 50 places.
That was Lael Young. Lael Young's Lael Young's parents were missionaries in Burma. And he had one brother, Philip was, I think, his name, a younger brother. They came to our school. That's the first time they'd ever been in a school like that. Their schooling before that was all homeschooling. But Lael was a shorter person, and his hair was usually messed up. When he would go to bed at night, he would loosen his trousers and step into, and just let his trousers fall down to the floor. And when he would get out of bed in the morning, he would step into the 2 holes and pull his trousers up. And his suitcases were full of new shirts. His folks had sent new shirts with him. Instead of him wearing one shirt for a while and then getting it clean, he would wear one new shirt until it was worn out, and then throw it away, then take out another new shirt and wear it. But he was very interesting. He was totally different from the others. He'd never been in a school like this before. It had all been, for Lael and his brother, they had all been homeschooling. So he was so brilliant, so smart. He wanted to take the trigonometry test, but he'd never been in the trigonometry class. So he asked if he could take the test with the other students who had studied for the whole semester in trigonometry. He would like to take the test with them, though he had never studied in the class. So the teacher agreed to let him do it. He got the best grade in the whole class, and he never attended any of the classes.
He just read the book or something.
Yeah, he studied the book,
Yeah,
and he knew all the answers.
Yeah.
One day in the chemistry class, he used to sit by me a lot, and we were friends. And he got angry and he hit the table like this. And I said, "What's wrong with you, Lael?" He said, I can only remember pi out to, it was 300 places or something like that. Or no, 3.14 pi. He could only remember that 80 places, I think. And he used to know about 300 places. It made him so angry that he had forgotten those. But he went, I understand he went to Redland University in California, and I think he became a professor, but he died at an early age. I don't know what took his life. I don't know why he died, but I don't think he lived very long.
One thing that they said about Fred Clothy, that Fern said about Fred Clothy, I think, or maybe you said, that when different students would introduce themselves and talk about their parents' work at the beginning of a school year,
Yeah.
many would boast about what their parents were doing.
Yes.
But Fred Clothy, whose parents had a huge work,
Yeah.
but he would call it a podunk thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And do reverse boasting. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of your teachers at Cody, who are some of the professors that or the teachers at Cody that stand out to you, teachers and dorm parents?
Pardon?
Some of the teachers at Cody, who you remember and who were particularly good teachers? You remember any that you?
Oh yeah, our mathematics teacher, Mr. Root, he was our scout leader.
Okay.
He was a very good teacher, and his wife too. I don't remember what she taught, but she was a teacher there in the school. And then we had an English teacher. She was a missionary teacher in China. Then when China expelled the missionaries, she and her husband came to India.
Mm-hmm.
And she was our English teacher. She was very good. And we had some very good teachers. Our music teacher was good. He was from Czechoslovakia. No, I think he was from Italy. Our language teacher, Mr. Musil, was from Czechoslovakia. And he was very strict. I was in the Latin class, and I had never studied another language. Most of the students there had already taken a language preparatory course in the 8th grade, but I had never had that class. So they knew some things about language study that I didn't, and I struggled. He got upset with me more than once. He made me come right up to the front of the class and sit there just in front of him, you know, and he would scold me sometimes. But as time went by, I began to improve.
Yeah.
And I had 2 years of Latin and then 2 years of French. So I had him for 4 years. And by the end of the 4 years, before I graduated, we became friends. And he used to confide in me. He told me one day, he said, "I have stopped smoking." And he said, "The reason for this is, I found that smoking is a moral escape. There are many people who smoke because somehow it helps their nerves. But he said, when I realized that, I have stopped smoking."
No.
And so he seemed to really appreciate me, you know, and by the end of the year, but in the beginning, I was probably one of the worst ones in the class. Fern and I were in the same class, because when she came to Cody, they did not have an 8th grade. For I don't remember the system they followed, but anyhow, they didn't have an 8th grade then. She was supposed to enter the 8th grade, but she either had to repeat, she either had to enter the 8th grade or skip the 8th grade and go to the 9th, or repeat the 7th grade again. So they said, let her try the 9th grades, let her try skipping the grades. So that put her in the same grade that I was in. And so she struggled, but she came out on top. You know,
Yeah.
She did well. So that's how it was that we both graduated at the same time.
The school, the size of the student body must not have been very big if they didn't have any 8th graders.
I don't know why that was. I
Yeah.
don't really know. I can't remember.
And Fern mentioned that once there was sometimes they would have a long weekend, and some of the parents would come and take their kids out of school.
Yes.
But some parents could not come, and so the kids who were left behind,
Yeah.
one time they would get together. So she said she was going to make some chocolate chip cookies, but she used laxative.
Oh.
Chocolate laxative for the chocolate chips. And while she was doing it, and you knew what was going on,
Yeah.
but then one other student happened to come in and discover what she was doing, and so he had to be sworn to secrecy. And then, so it was 3 of you who knew what was going on. And then when the others gathered for the time together,
Yeah.
and they chocolate chip cookies, and that some of them were really stuffing themselves with chocolate chip cookies. And then that evening, lo and behold, what happened to them, you know.
Yeah, I remember that faintly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I think I'm going to have to get some rest now, Stan.
So anyway, that was very interesting. Somewhere in here, while you were in high school, you were beginning to get a burden for the work.
Yes.
And so how did that happen? You went down to the plains
We
and
went down to the plains, and my father would involve us in the work, and eventually he asked me to speak occasionally.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was in the 11th grade, I was really feeling an interest in India.
yeah.
And I'm thankful for that.
But he must have. You had some conversation with him about your hunger for your burden for the people. I mean, why else
Yeah.
would he ask you to speak?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he knew I was having a feeling for the people of India.
yeah,
He'd give me a chance to speak. And when he would have a business meeting concerning the work, often as I got older, he would invite me to sit with the business meeting, you know, with the committee,
okay,
so I could learn.
okay.
And he was very wise.
And that's so. When we come back, I would like to talk about the beginning of your ministry as you
Oh,
launch
yeah.
as you
Okay.
launch into that.
Okay.